I am pursuing bachelor's degree in computer branch at MIT Academy of Engineering. Today, I will be presenting about a build tool or a design tool which is known as Maven and talk about dependencies and how to resolve upon dependencies. Dependencies is nothing but it refers to an external library, modules or package or software project relies on to function properly. Now, these dependencies are typically third-party code that provides functionality not built into the project. Now, dependencies can include anything from basic programming libraries to complex frameworks, and they may be written in the same programming language or in different language. A project may have multiple dependencies, like each of which may have its own dependencies. So, like if one file changes, then the other file would also require to be changed due to the change in the first file. Now, managing these dependencies is an essential part of software development as it ensures that a project has access to the necessary functionality without having to reinvent the whole entire process. And now, dependency management tools such as Maven, Gradle, or even Spring help automate these processes of downloading, managing, and updating these dependencies. However, dependencies can also introduce challenges such as version conflicts. Like for example, we are like using MySQL dependency of version 5. Now that would be not compatible with Hibernate of latest version. So we might have to adjust those particular things, which is version conflicts. Apart from that, there are security vulnerabilities or licensing issues wherein the dependencies which we are using might not be an open source tool. So we have to change that particular dependency. So it is very important to carefully manage and monitor these dependencies in software project to ensure that our project remains stable, secure, and maintainable over time. Now, what is tightly coupled or loosely coupled in dependencies? Now, tightly coupled basically occurs like, for example, when one component is highly dependent on another component. This means that changes in one component will likely require changes in the other component, making it difficult to modify or maintain the system. Now, tight coupling often leads to the code that is difficult to reuse or test. Like changing one particular file would be extremely hard for a tester to reuse it again or test the particular dependencies. Now, loosely coupling occurs when components are independent of each other and changes to one component does not require changes to other component. This allows for more flexibility and modularity in the system, making it easier to maintain and modify. Now, loosely coupled systems often use interfaces such as abstract classes, wherein we don't have to mention like what method is need to be used in that. Like we can just call it into the new file and like implement that particular interface and then dependency injection to reduce the dependencies and promote independence between components. Now, in terms of dependencies, tightly coupling refers to a situation where component or module relies heavily on another component or module, either directly or indirectly. And loosely coupling, on the other hand, refers to a situation where a component or module has minimal or no dependency on other components or modules, making it modular and easier to maintain. Now, how do we actually solve these like dependencies and what is actually Maven? Now, Maven is a very popular tool built by Apache Maven, and it is a tool used for build automation and dependency management tool used primarily for Java-based projects. Now, it is designed to simplify the process of building, packaging, and deploying software by managing its dependencies and providing a uniform build system. Now, Maven uses a project object tool called as POM file. Now, POM stands for Project Object Model. Now, these describe the project being built, its dependencies on other external modules or libraries. Like for example, when we are writing a Python code, whichever module we are particularly importing has been mentioned on the like header part of it. Now, similarly in Java, we use the jar files. So these are the dependencies which we will be using in a Maven file, and this dependencies can be inputted into the POM file. And the build process required to compile this package and the project. Now, Maven also provides a central repository of open source libraries, making it easier, very easy, for developers to locate and download the required dependencies. Now, Maven can be used like from the command line or through IDE plugin, like very famous in Eclipse or even in VS Code. Now, this is a very useful tool in terms of continuous integration pipeline, like CI, which is the part of like DevOps. Now, it is widely used nowadays in Java community and has many plugins available for integrating with other technologies and tools. And Maven is a very powerful build automation and dependency management tools in terms of this. Now, what is actually like how can we use Maven or what are the things which Maven basically can do? Now, the main thing I'll talk about few main things like such as dependency management and such as Maven can automatically download and manage the required dependencies for a project, making it easy to ensure that all the required libraries are available and up to date. And these dependencies are basically downloaded when we mention the dependencies from the Maven website, which we take and we insert into the POM file. And next thing is build automation, where Maven can compile source code, run tests, generate reports, or create deployable artifacts such as jar files or war files and executable binaries. And standardization, such as like it project structure and build process, making it easier for developers to work on project with different teams or different machines. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it is a famous part of DevOps also, like for continuous integration, as Maven can be integrated with continuous integration tools such as Jenkins or Travis CI to automate the build and testing process. Now, dependency resolution, Maven can handle transitive dependencies and can ensure that all dependencies required for a project are available and compatible with each other, like to avoid the version conflicts between each other. Now, overall, we can say that like Maven will save developers time and effort automating all these tasks of dependencies. Now, what are the actual advantages in terms of build automation? Consistency, as Maven ensures that all developers are using the same build process and dependencies, so that there would be a consistent output over different existing systems, such as consider it an either be a mobile like a MacBook or even a Windows. So even the operating systems are different, but the code output will be same on both the systems. How actually Maven works. Now coming on to the Eclipse ID, this is the Eclipse ID, wherein I have created a simple project to enter the entering data into the database. So for that, I have configured an two XML file wherein there is an employee file and there is a configuration file which will be connecting to my JDBC. And now we will be seeing like how we can actually deploy this particular thing. So coming on to the thing, I have two files over here, employee.java, wherein I have inserted getter and setter for first name, ID, and last name. Apart from that, store data.java, wherein I'm going to be inserting the values for a particular ID, let's say 123, and the first name would be given like for example Naruto, and last name will be given as Uzuma, and this will be saved into the table which is being mentioned in employee.table. For example, the MIT employee, which is my table name, and the Hibernate configuration file will be used, which is the configuration which I'm going to use. Now, to use this particular Hibernate file, I have to mention it into the reference library. So, for example, all these reference library have been manually inputted. Now, how do we actually input this particular file? We'll go to the like for example, whenever we create a dynamic project, we go to the build path, and from that we select configure build path. Now, as you can see, there are options available here wherein I can add external jar files or add jar file. Now, when I click on the add external jar files, I can just simply go and select one of the jar file. For example, if I want to use OKHTTP, then I will select it open, and whenever I insert it, after that I'll use apply and close, wherein the particular file will be inserted. And after insertion of the file, I have to use this like update the Maven file. For example, we will come to whenever we are going to be inserting the dependencies. Now, once we use this jar file, we are manually inputting each and every dependencies. So, for example, if I'm going to use this SQL connector, how will it work to Java Persistence API? How will it work with Hibernate? Now, for example, I'm using SQL for 8.0.32. Now, it is compatible with Hibernate 5.5.9. Whereas if I'm using earlier version or if I'm using different version of SQL, then this will not work most of the time. So coming on to the deployment, a small deployment I'll show you. Like I will run this particular file as an application. Now, as you can see, when I hit this particular file, once I save this file and execute it, now you can see data has been saved into the file, and the insertion of the Naruto Uzumaki has been done into the table. And moving on to the same thing, how we can do it. This is a normal file where I have not used any Maven class, or we cannot save any POM XML wherein I have not inserted any dependencies. Now I have used like various configuration files, and I have to manually input each and every jar file present over here. For example, these are all the jar files which are present over there. Now coming on to the same implementation with using Maven. Now, how we actually use the Maven file, I have used a similar thing, like for the example, employee file for the JDBC connection, and the same employee and data file, store data file, wherein I'm going to be like entering the file. For example, I'm going to using the different ID as I've set the primary key ID, so I cannot use the duplicate file. Now we can see the new file over here, which is pom.xml, which we saw that it was not present in the previous file. Now when we move on to this pom.xml, Now you can see all these things, which is dependency.hibernate 5.5.5 final and dependencies 8.0.32 for MySQL connector. Now only thing I have to mention is these dependencies. Now when I want to like insert a new dependencies, I will like, for example, let's say that this particular dependency was not present over there, so I have to go and search it on the like online website of Maven, where they have presented like all the dependencies present over there, and I have to copy those dependencies and insert it over here. Now, once I have done this, I have to go here, and in Maven, I have to update the project so that it can insert or download the files which have been mentioned into the like dependencies. Now, once the update of this particular code has been done, now in that we can see Maven dependency will automatically download each and every jar file, so I don't have to manually copy and download this individually jar files so that they are compatible with each other. So instead of having a tightly coupled system, we will have a loosely coupled system over here. Now this same thing will be working over here. For example, if I want to insert this particular data, now this is not completely like loosely coupled, as I have not inserted any particular jar file, or there is no jar file which is missing when I'm in terms of working. So if I'm, for example, when I'm using any other file, or when I'm not using Maven, this particular conflict will be having high chances if I'm not using Maven. So jar file might be missing or might not be compatible. So this tightly coupled system we generally avoid. Now coming on to the same thing, and when we implement this particular part using Maven, now we can see over here the same thing has been done, but with the loosely coupled system. Now we can see the data has been saved here perfectly. So this is the small implementation of Maven and how Maven works. So this can be done. And also I'll like to show one more thing, like how we can download a file. So for example, we want to download any Maven dependency. So we will directly go here, and we can see like Maven repositories over here. So for example, if I want to download the SQL dependency for Maven, so I can go over here and go to the MySQL connector. And as I showed you earlier, if I want to use particular any version, I have to just click on it, and this is the one thing which we need to copy over here. So this dependency I will copy and paste into the my Eclipse ID in form.xml file uh, over here, and it will be working like smoothly without like missing any jar file, which would be highly possible in terms of like using when we are using. So this is how Maven works, and this is a extremely powerful tool, build tool, wherein we can combine this all the dependencies, and this will make our system loosely coupled instead of having a tightly coupled system. Apart from that, this will help us to automate the build process, which will like install all the dependencies or the jar files whichever we are missing, and the building would be like extremely, like for example, if we are, it will automate the build process, like allowing developers to focus on writing code rather than manually downloading the file or manually importing the packaging of the project. Now continuous integration is also very easy in terms of Maven. So this is how basically Maven works, and these are the few tools which we will be like using or seeing in the Maven. So this can be implemented over a large project also. So that was it from me, guys. Thank you, and you can also reach out to me on viraj.girder@mitaoe.ac.in, or we can also connect on LinkedIn. So it is Viraj Girder on LinkedIn as well. So thank you, guys. Thank you very much.